navigating conflict and disagreements, especially with those we love, is hard. And I want to acknowledge that. And that in doing so, you are taking a risk. And I think that that's part of this dynamic that we never talk about. It's emotional risk. And so just to be able to acknowledge that, I think enables us to lean in more. And so often the emotional risk is rejection or hurt or exclusion, different things that can really feel hard. And when we can lean in and we can take those risks intentionally, amazing connection and possibilities can happen.
Welcome to yourbrilliance.com. I'm your host, Amy Waterman. So there's someone in your life that you care about very much. And maybe it's an auntie, maybe it's a best friend, maybe it's an old family friend. And recently you've come to realize just how different your belief systems are. So when you talk to them about certain topics, and you know the ones, right? The pandemic and mask wearing and politics and Black Lives Matter, you cannot find common ground. And you can't believe they think the way they do. You've never disagreed like this before. And it's hurting your relationship because you've always had so much in common and you could talk about anything. And now there's this huge topic that you can't even bring up without arguing. So how do you save your relationship without feeling like you have to silence yourself? Well, our guest for today, Ariana Friedlander, is an expert in having difficult conversations. She's a master facilitator, a certified conversational intelligence coach, and a trained Add Heart Facilitator with over 18 years of experience in fostering positive change within organizations and companies. And today she is going to show us how to stay connected even when there's conflict. Welcome, Ariana.
Thanks, Amy. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, let's start off with a story because when we spoke last time, I was telling you about this old friend that I was having a hard time feeling connected to because she had said some things, and of course they were political, that I felt were not just unkind, but actually kind of cruel. And I couldn't say that to her. And now our relationship, it feels like, is gone on pause. And I know you have had your own experience having really difficult conversations with close friends and loved ones. And I was wondering, what has that been like for you?
Well, Amy, it has been really emotional. I think just as you mentioned earlier, it is intense and it feels very personal and it feels very vulnerable and it feels like I'm being rejected or that I am disappointing my friends or that they're disappointing me. And so I think it's just emotional. There's no way around it. You cannot deny that it is emotional to broach these subjects.
And I think part of it too is that, especially as women, we don't like having conflict. And we especially don't like having conflict with someone we love. And so often what we end up doing is we agree to disagree. And then we just don't talk about it so that we don't create any more hurt feelings than necessary. And I was wondering, is that a good strategy for dealing with these situations?
Well, so I have one friend in particular that we were talking about before that I realized in the last few months and really the last year, our beliefs have, there's this huge chasm that's been created between our beliefs. And so we actually had that conversation because we'd been kind of like picking at each other a little bit. And eventually she just said, Ariana, I don't like conflict. I don't think that we should talk about this anymore. And I took a deep breath when she said that to me. And I said, I respect where you're coming from and I disagree. I said, I feel like if you and I can't navigate these difficult conversations together, then how can we as communities and as a nation and as a world navigate them? Like we love each other. And so we talked about it some more and we agreed that we had to have some boundaries with these conversations, one of which was acknowledging it's emotional for both of us and that there are different things that fire each of us up. And so to be open about that happens and when that happens instead of attacking each other. And the other was that we needed to make sure that we were committing the time to have conversations around conflict because they can't happen instantaneously. And so you're looking at sometimes an hour long conversation or so. And that is something that you need to make time for in your life and really be able to accommodate. And so that was my personal take was, when we can lean into conflict with someone that we love and care about, we both can grow exponentially. So I'm a big fan of leaning in when it's possible.
So I have a question about that. What is the goal of that conversation? Because it feels to me that often when you get in conversations like that, the goal is to get one side to agree with the other. So it's almost like trying to convince the other person. When you have those conversations with your friend, what was the ideal outcome of that conversation?
So you bring up a really good point. And I think that that's something that a lot of us encounter and experience is what we have in our culture, an addiction to being right. Because when we are right in conversation, it releases dopamine in the brain, which triggers the reward centers. And that's exactly what happens with like a gambling addiction, right? And so we really like to be right. We really like to get others to agree with us. And so we have to be mindful of how we are approaching the conversation. And there were times for sure with this friend in particular when I would approach the conversation with this attitude of, she just needs to understand. I just need to get her to see. And inevitably that does not work. We all leave the conversation feeling really frustrated. And so I'm mindful to approach it more, first of all, with an open mind. So I am open. I am willing to let her influence me. And I really do genuinely want to understand where she's coming from. And I'm striving to connect with her. And so I might leave the conversation not agreeing with her. We just actually talked this week. And so I had to bring up some stuff that was bothering me, some things that she said that I, took very personally, even though I know it's not, but I had to share how it was making me feel. And I also shared that I really wanted to understand where this was coming from for her. And so in listening to that, I now see the pain and the frustration that she's experienced that has led her to this point of view. And understanding the backstory, I can work with her and we can talk about that instead of, arguing positions or points or trying to get my point across. And so really it's about if I want her to see and hear me, I need to see and hear her.
Yeah. That's so true. Once you find out the backstory, you can really see where people are coming from. But one of the interesting ways I've navigated this, which is not the way I recommend to anyone, is that I listen to people and I hear their backstory, but I never tell them what I think or feel. And a lot of that comes from my childhood. So I grew up in a family that literally, I know who these people are. They cut people out if these people had the wrong beliefs because it was about family loyalty. If you were part of the family, you believed the same way the family did. And if you did not believe that way, then you were not part of the family. You had betrayed the family. And I think that word betrayal really describes how we feel when somebody disagrees with us on something that matters so much, especially when what they're saying is stuff that we associate with like the enemy. So how can we reconcile then our love for someone with that instinctive almost revulsion for the words that are coming out of their mouth.
Yeah, I think that your story is so relatable. And I imagine that a lot of people have similar experiences in their families. And it really does feel like a betrayal. And I think that it's really important to bring our awareness to the way that we are feeling and to the stories that we are telling ourselves. And we can feel it. We know when it's happening, right? You sense this change. Maybe, as you were saying at the intro, it's like a conversation with your auntie and it's going really well. And then all of a sudden this topic comes up and it's like everything changes on a dime. My husband calls it my 0 to 60. It's like, we'll be having a fine conversation. Then all of a sudden I'm like, rare, you know, we all get that time. And it's, you know, there's a neurochemical reaction happening that explains it. It's part of our shared humanity. But we need to be aware of it and not controlled by it. And when we can recognize that, oh my gosh, I was just triggered. That's triggering me. And to then see that whenever we experience a trigger, there's a story that we make up. We start telling ourselves, and it comes with a bunch of assumptions and things that we are making up to, things that we are filling in the gaps. Well, they just don't care. If they cared, they wouldn't do this, right? Where we start passing judgment, we start shielding and protecting ourselves because when we're triggered, we feel like our safety is under threat. So we respond as such. So I think it's so important to bring our awareness into all of those pieces within ourselves. I'm a big fan of journaling as a way to deepen our awareness of that. Be it in retrospect and looking back and going, wow, this kind of really fired up in that conversation. And this is what really got my goat, you know?
Now, I just want to tell our audience too, Ariana leads some amazing workshops on journaling, and we are going to give you a link to Ariana's site later on in the show so that you can perhaps join Ariana in some journaling exercises.
Yeah. Thank you. And so, I think that there's times where you can reflect and you start to see, and then you can rewrite the narrative. You don't have to let it be getting you so fired up. It could be time out, pause in the conversation, or step back and pause yourself and regroup and really, you know, what is it you want to share? What is the truth you have to bring? Can I say something else about the betrayal and the family dynamic?
Yeah.
That feels like very much in direct conflict with our values of, you know, the right for life and liberty and individualism, right? And very much a part of the patriarchy.
Yes. You've got the nail on the head there. Yeah, I think that is very much the case because either you are a member of this family and you stand for what this family stands for. And if you choose to have beliefs that go against our beliefs, then you are a threat to the sanctity of this family and you must not be part of it because we can't tolerate having you there. And it is so hard because what you've just finished describing to us is how to keep holding love even when you're triggered. And what my experience has been the opposite, that the minute that trigger comes up, the love gets cut off. And so that's why I really appreciate you sharing those ideas about how to have a little bit more awareness of our triggers and not allow it to suck us up and to cut off the love.
And it's a choice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's a choice.
Yeah.
So one of the things that really interested me was when you talked about having your conversation with your friend, you said that you had set boundaries around that conversation to keep it safe. And I know that you are a facilitator and you are a coach in conversational intelligence. So you have a lot of experience facilitating difficult conversations, not just personally, but of course, professionally. So when like when some of your clients say, okay, I'm going into a difficult conversation, what key elements do you share with them and tell them that they need to be able to get through this conversation without getting triggered and having it be productive?
Well, I think preparation, right? Again, back to that is so important. And so recognizing and understanding what are the things that do trigger me. And so being mindful of that in advance. Also the openness, if you're approaching the conversation dead set on convincing someone you are right, it's not probably going to go as well as you think. And what I find is, and even in conversations with this one friend I shared earlier, and she was starting to share with me some things she was questioning about. And I said to her, I don't think that it's either or. I don't think it's one reality or the other. There's usually, both have some legitimacy. And so I think it's the same when we approach these conversations. And above and beyond that, though, it's really important to be mindful of and considerate of how do you want the other person to feel? Maya Angelou said that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And so it's one way we rarely prepare for conversations is to be intentional and mindful of how we want that person to feel. And the way that we are showing up is impacting how they are going to feel. But it does.
That's so important. I'm wondering what happens though when the other person doesn't agree to your boundaries and the other person is not coming into the conversation with the hope of a constructive outcome. They are still pretty convinced they're right. And I wondered if there was ever a point where you just had to say, this isn't going to work. I guess this is just something that maybe you and I had better not talk about anymore.
Absolutely. I think any time that bullying comes into the picture, aggressive, hurtful, and attacking behavior and words come into the picture, boundary. And it can be really hard. And personally, usually when I can, that boundary is pretty hard. And it's like, I'm not even going to let you in my life if that's where you're going to go. And that's happened to me. And it's actually happened with people that I haven't necessarily had disagreements with on these bigger beliefs. But it was the way they showed up in conversation when there was a conflict was to turn my vulnerability around as a way to attack me. And that's never acceptable.
No. And it happens a lot.
It does. And so, there are those times where the other person has to be willing and able to show up in the conversation in that way. They have to be open-minded as well. And so you can't force that. It's just like the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. And it's the same with conversations like this. You can do your best to create the space and to set the conditions. And if they're not willing to, then you have to draw that boundary and not put yourself in harm's way. It's not worth it.
Yeah. Now you have a consulting business and you actually take this into companies, you take this into organizations to help people dealing with interpersonal conflict at the workplace. So tell us how all of these skills translate into the workplace.
Well, everything's interconnected. So every time I lead a workshop in a company, there's always somebody that has a teenage daughter or son and goes, oh my gosh, this all makes so much sense. So the skills are all interconnected. And really what I find the work I do helps within organizations with is rewriting patterns, and having conversations, talking and thinking differently, because we are creatures of habit. And so we typically have conversations that are at the surface level, and we don't always get down to the root issue or the deeper meaning and desire and aspiration. And so that's where conflict can breed because we don't actually have a deeper shared understanding. And that's habitual. We just kind of get into these habits of talking in certain ways. And so that's what I find when I come in and work with companies, nonprofits, for-profits, government, whatever, that we're shifting the dynamic. We're thinking and talking in new ways. And that's allowing the wisdom of the room to surface and for us to bring that collective wisdom together to solve complicated problems.
I really like that because it means that, a lot of us aren't going to seek out that kind of coaching in our personal lives, but just to know that if we get it on a professional level and we learn those skills at work, maybe it's just a workshop offered by our company, that then it will make a difference in our personal lives. And that's beautiful.
Yeah, everything's connected. So it's beautiful in that way. I agree.
Now, you're offering our viewers a free gift. This is really cool. This is what to do when you need a shift in your life.
Yeah, so I have a free course that people can download where I will show you how to go through the 4 steps when you are in dire need of change. And through going through these 4 steps, you will gain clarity. You will be able to take purposeful action and you'll be able to remove roadblocks. We all have experiences where we start to feel stuck or weary of dealing with the same old problems. I've been there myself. And so this is a course that is based on what I've done for myself personally and worked with clients on to create a profound shift.
That sounds fantastic. Now, for those of you watching, if you're ready to get your free gift, or whether maybe you just want more information on how to navigate those difficult conversations, we have a link for you. Just go to yourbrilliance.org/Ariana. So that's yourbrilliance.org/ARIANA. Thank you so much, Ariana, for coming onto the show. And I wondered if you had any last message you would like to leave our viewers with.
Yeah, I want to say that navigating conflict and disagreements, especially with those we love, is hard. And I want to acknowledge that. And that in doing so, you are taking a risk. And I think that that's part of this dynamic that we never talk about. It's emotional risk. And so just to be able to acknowledge that, I think enables us to lean in more. And so often the emotional risk is rejection or hurt or exclusion, different things that can really feel hard. And when we can lean in and we can take those risks intentionally, amazing connection and possibilities can happen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you out there for watching. Now, did you have any new insights or aha moments while watching this interview? If so, share them with us in the comments. And for more interviews like these, make sure to subscribe to Your Brilliance TV here on YouTube. And then come on over to yourbrilliance.com for more tips and insights on how you can live your most brilliant life. See you next time.